For those with type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, you may be missing a hidden signal from your kidneys, an SOS for an increased risk of cardiovascular events like heart attack or stroke. The mission? Detect the SOS. Start at detectthesos.com. Learn how a simple UACR urine test can help identify kidney damage early. Talk to your doctor about getting screened. Go to detectthesos.com to learn more about UACR urine testing today. Brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, Inc.
March 15th, 1895, Tipperary County, Ireland. A young woman is being tested to see if she is still human. A woman who earns her own money, wears her skirts a little sharper than her neighbors think proper, and a woman who is physically ill. She would be forced to swallow bitter herbal concoctions, doused in urine, dragged from her bed to the hearth and fire, and questioned over and over about her identity. This is a story of superstition, a community's beliefs in fairies, and how it all collided with a woman's independence, a husband's wounded pride, and how folklore can become a language for violence. This is the Changeling murder of Bridget Cleary, Ireland's fairy wife. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Gambia.
Gambia.
Dala Akdiam.
Very nice. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people from Gambia and Ireland and all the places we're going to talk about today who love true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yes.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. All you have to do is answer a couple questions, and you are in. Mm-hmm. Please go join.
Please.
I post photos and other information in there as well. It's a wonderful group of folks. We love them a lot.
Yep, it's a wacky crew.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it every single episode.
Every single day, every single hour,
Right now, every single hour. We're burning the candle at both ends over here, y'all.
Yeah.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a message. The link to that is now at the bottom of the show notes. I always say it's at the top, but now it's at the bottom.
There you go.
Well, we had dinner with our good friends, Tommy and Marty, and they're listeners of the podcast.
Yep.
And Marty mentioned to me that she really likes the older cases. And I had this one in my files, so I pulled it out just for Marty.
There you go, Marty.
And I do love the older cases for sure. And today we're going to Ireland to talk about fairies. So if you're Irish and I screw up one or all of these names, these town names and county names, I officially beg your forgiveness now.
Oh, the luck of the Irish.
I really did try very hard to get all the pronunciations correct. You should have seen I was on every site you could find, waiting for somebody to say something. I was even on a high school newscast just to hear them say the name of their school because that was the name that's in this area. And I was like, I just need to hear it.
Now I know what to gift you for one of your stocking stuffers for Christmas. It's Irish for Dummies.
Yeah, and they even speak English. So it's just the cadence, and sometimes it's a little hard. Even the interviews I watched, like on YouTube and stuff, I was like, wait, what did he say? And I would back it up just a little bit and listen again.
I love the Irish accent, though. I mean, I'm sure it's because they're whatever my descendants were, but just a great accent.
Mm-hmm. Ireland.
Yes, Ireland.
Ireland. Before we get started, let me thank some sources. Wikipedia, Hidden History, Waterford Treasures, Dig Podcast, Ancient Origins, Atlas Obscura, RTE, Women's History Network, and the Library of Ireland, just to name a few. If you would like to see them all or read a blog about this podcast, you can find a link with all of it in there at the bottom of our show notes.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Bridget Boland was born on February 19th, 1869 in County Tipperary, Ireland. She loved to sew. She was an accomplished dressmaker. She made her own clothes. She made her own income, sewing for other women and also selling eggs and hens. Huh. She is very independent.
Okay.
In August of 1887, she marries Michael Cleary, who was a cooper. And a cooper is someone who is skilled in the craft of making, repairing, and maintaining wooden staved containers, like a cask or a vat or a barrel. And there are still cooperages in Kentucky, where we live, that fix and repair bourbon barrels today.
Huh.
Now, when these two marry, he's around 35 years old, and she is 18.
Oh.
Robbing the cradle.
Big time.
They lived near Clonmel. I looked all of these up again, but I'm still going to screw them up. With or beside her father in a cottage in Ballyvudley that was said to have been on or near a reputed fairy fort or a ring fort, a detail that locals linked to fairy beliefs.
All right.
And Bridget and Michael will never have any children, which is something that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Right.
But before we get started about everything, let's talk about fairies for just a minute.
Okay.
The belief in fairies and changelings was still widespread in rural Ireland in the late 19th century, especially around sites like ring forts, which were regarded as entrances to the realm of the Sidhe, or fair folk. She means people of the mounds, and these are the whimsical little winged creatures you might think of when the word fairy comes up.
Right.
But these fairies are darker and far more complex. It's rooted in ancient Celtic mythology, and these beings blend pre-Christian gods, nature spirits, and the supernatural other world that exists parallel to our own world. And archaeologically, ring forts are early medieval farmsteads or defended homesteads, earth or stone enclosures that once held wooden houses and livestock pens for minor lords and wealthy farmers.
Okay.
Now, folklore later recast them as entrances to the other world and dwelling places of the Sidhe or the fairies. So people avoided cutting trees, digging, or building on them for fear of illness, bad luck, or supernatural retaliation.
Yeah, don't tick off the fairies.
But it's often described as a lonely, circular rise or bank on a hill or in a boggy field, a place locals treat with respect, and they avoid them at night.
Okay.
Lights, strange music, or winds are sometimes said to circle these mounds, and a lone fairy tree or a hawthorn tree is usually on or beside the ring, and that can be a key landmark. And people sometimes tie ribbons, cloth strips, or small tokens to the branches as offerings or petitions for healing and good fortune. Again, don't make the fairies mad.
Seems like a lot of trouble for something that little.
True. The fairies trace back to the Tua de Danann Tried to get that one out. A godlike race of skilled magical beings who once ruled Ireland. After defeat by the invading Milesians, these are the ancestors of the Irish, they retreated underground into fairy mounds, she or wraths, ancient ring forts, burial mounds, or hills, using magic to become invisible or diminish themselves in size. They live in a parallel realm, just like I said, hidden by enchantments like the Fethfia, which is a veil or mist, or Gaelga, which is Gaelic in Ireland.
Right.
And in Scotland, they say Gaelic.
Right.
But fairies are not inherently good or evil. They're impulsive, unpredictable, proud, and powerful. I'm talking about them like they're real.
Because they are.
They can be benevolent, granting luck, gifts, and can be helpful or vengeful, cursing those who offend them. And the key traits of the Fae are they farm, of all things, they party, they dance, play music, and fight like humans, but with supernatural abilities. Sounds a lot like Appalachia.
Yeah.
Don't mess with
Are
us.
these little tiny fairies? Or
Some of them are.
Yeah.
They're saying that some of them are little. Some of them are not.
Okay.
And these fairies, they fear the metal iron, which is a common protective charm. And they also fear holy water, salt, and Christianity. And many tales of fairies mix pagan beliefs like Wicca and Druidism with Christian components. Now, the common dwellings or places they live are these fairy rings. A lot of times they're circles of mushrooms, and they like to dance inside there. But if you step inside, you risk being trapped or taken.
You know, this sounds like something that someone made up so they could get out of going to church on Sundays. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, just wait.
Okay.
These fairies, they abduct humans for various reasons. To make them servants, a bride or a groom, to make them a wet nurse, to strengthen their bloodline, or out of just flat out envy or malice. They're just mean.
Okay.
And fairies are divided into types. There are trooping fairies who are human-sized, group-dwelling fairies who often dress in green. They're friendly if respected, but dangerous if not. They're called the Dinashi. There are also solitary fairies. These are isolated tricksters like the leprechaun who likes to hide gold, the Coolracan, who's kind of like a drunken cousin of the leprechaun, the Fardir, which is a mischievous, a red-clad prankster. He has a red beard, and he likes to attack at night or during the winter months of the year. And then finally, there are the changelings, or the Shifra. And these fairies steal beautiful, healthy human children, especially unbaptized babies or fair children, blonde hair, blue eyes. And they leave a fairy substitute in this child's place.
You know, the one that you were talking about, the one that is green and can...
Yes, like the leprechaun.
That if you treat them with respect, but if they can be very... It explains a lot about my fourth grade teacher.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I won't mention her name, but she wore a lot of green.
Oh, okay.
And she could be very mean.
There you have it. Well, they were tricksters. They like hiding the gold and stuff like the leprechaun. Maybe she was like the drunken cousin that I was talking about.
I don't know.
Her drunken uncle.
No, I just never looked her straight in the eyes.
But they steal these children because they want to raise the human child in fairyland to bolster the fairy race or to gain human love and affection. And sometimes they will use the child as a servant, and sometimes they take people or children just out of revenge. And sometimes they will swap an elderly fairy to die comfortably among humans.
Wow.
And these are the signs of a changeling: sudden illness, failure to thrive, or odd aging, like a baby. I read this, like a baby with a beard or long teeth. Never saw that before. Or unnatural wisdom, constant crying, mischief, or playing music like bad bagpipes in the cradle. If you're playing bad bagpipes in the cradle, I would be calling for the fairies to come get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recorded bagpipes one time, And I had them in my booth, which is soundproof. It literally like they were standing next to me.
Listen, they're beautiful.
They are beautiful. I love them.
If you know how to play. I can't imagine being in a bagpipe school where they're trying to teach you how to play.
They're just so loud. It's amazing. But they are beautiful. I love bagpipes.
But they think that this changeling is there if the family suffers bad luck while caring for this changeling. And in order to get their loved one back, they have to love this changeling in order to get the real child back.
Sounds a little extortionist.
You got to love something that you don't like.
I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Now, there are protective traditions to ward off fairies. Iron objects, like I said before, like nails or horseshoes, can be placed over doors and cradles. By the way, that's where the tradition of placing an iron horseshoe over the door comes from.
Oh.
It's to ward off fairies or the devil, so not necessarily for luck. But it comes from this Irish legend, which I had no idea about. It's this Irish legend of a blacksmith nailing a red-hot shoe onto the devil's hoof, forcing him to swear never to enter a home with one over the door. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is.
But as far as fairies, it wards them off because of the power of iron. And it's considered magical because it comes from the earth and it withstands fire. But other protective traditions are rowan branches, St. Bridget's crosses, holy water. Those are all considered very protective.
Okay.
By the way, some people place the horseshoe in a U shape, like up to catch good luck. That's what I was always taught.
Right.
Other people place it down to pour luck on whomever walks underneath it. We were always taught, don't turn it in. You're letting the luck run out. So who knows?
We were just taught to use good nails because if it fell on your head, that ain't good luck.
And that's not a fairy.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, to ward off the fairies, according to Irish folklore, you should avoid, I loved this, praising children too much because it invites envy. And you should never disturb fairy sites. And still today, many roads in Ireland were and are rerouted around fairy trees or mounds. Still today, people won't walk through them.
Wow.
Now, some older rural folks still avoid these forts and because they don't want to annoy the fairies. And apparently annoying the fairies is sort of a half-joking phrase. But these fairy rings, these natural mushroom circles, remain tied to this legend, and stepping in one might lead to dancing for years or abduction.
So if I stepped in a mushroom ring, I'm going to be dancing for years?
Apparently.
Oh my gosh.
You just keep dancing, I guess.
You end up in a theme park somewhere.
But more than anything, this folklore is really a way to explain illness or disability in a pre-medical era, to explain like fears of child loss and even tensions between old beliefs and Christianity, and of course the blurred lines between the natural and supernatural in the Irish culture. And there were stories that fairies could abduct young women, particularly attractive or independent ones, leaving behind a sickly or strange acting double. And they would be very ill. They would have a personality change. Or even if the young woman was defiant on her own, meaning she was independent, God forbid, it could all be interpreted as a sign of a changeling. But there were ways to cure a changeling. Fairy cures could escalate from harmless charms and herbal remedies to violent ordeals intended to force the supposed fairy to reveal itself or to flee. That's called foreshadowing. Yes.
There you go.
In order to expose or expel a changeling, according to folklore, you can boil water in eggshells because changelings reveal themselves by commenting on the oddity. I guess boiling eggshells. It's like, that's weird. Why are you doing that?
There's a lot of rules with this.
I'm telling
Good
you,
grief.
you mess up one, you're done for the rest of your life, apparently.
Yeah.
You can hold the changeling over fire or use iron to force the fairy to flee up the chimney. You can threaten boiling them or other, quote, cures to make the real person or child return. And these beliefs sometimes led to tragic real-world harm because sick or disabled children were suspected as changelings, and this resulted in abuse or worse. And now that you know all of that, I want to take you back to our story about Bridget Cleary. She was a very pretty woman. She was outspoken and modern for her time in the late 1800s. She was very stylish. I mean, she's a dressmaker. And Bridget did call out her husband when she didn't agree with him, and they would argue. It was once reported that Bridget, this is a good one, rubbed a coin on her thigh. And this was something that was interpreted as suspicious. But perhaps it was a folk remedy or even a flirtation. Yeah, let me tell you what. You know how you get an Irish guy? You rub a coin on your leg.
That's how you got me.
It's true. Yeah, right. But there are plenty of people who believed that her husband, Michael, was very controlling and jealous. And I did look up the folk remedy with the coin, and in Irish folk medicine, rubbing a coin, specifically a silver coin or a gold sovereign on the skin, was a traditional cure for ringworm, which was known to them as wildfire. Okay. So because ringworm leaves a distinct circular rash, they thought using a circular coin, mostly a silver one, on the spot would match and remove the ring. It was also a cure, get this, for warts, or more than that, wart transference. The coin was used to buy the wart and then left for someone else to find, whereby they would get the wart transference. Like you rub the coin on the wart and then you leave it for somebody else to pick up.
This sounds like one too many Guinnesses. It really does. I'm sorry.
Well, I only want to tell you about the coin on her thigh because her husband and some of the people around her believed that it was suspicious. Also suspicious was the fact that Bridget had been married to Michael for 8 years and they didn't have any children. And Michael blamed Bridget for this. There had to be something wrong with her. But again, by 1895, Bridget is 26 years old. She's very independent. She was known to walk alone near a fairy fort, but really she's walking alone and delivering dresses and eggs in bad weather. And at some point before our story begins, Bridget reportedly told or repeated a local tale that her husband Michael's mother had once been, quote, away with the fairies, end quote, or taken by them, which was a common way of explaining odd behavior. And in some versions of this story, she implies that Michael's mother had been, quote, in the fort, end quote, under the fairy influence. And in others, she's joking or making a casual remark in front of neighbors, like maybe instead of saying, my mother-in-law is 2 bricks shy of a load, she says, she's away with the fairies.
Okay.
Now, whatever her intention was behind saying this, it really bothers Michael a lot. And Michael was already anxious about fairy matters. He carried iron. He avoided the ring forts. And then hearing that his wife publicly linked his own mom to the fair folk felt like it was an attack on his family's respectability. And by him, an extension of him, his respectability.
Right.
And in this patriarchal setting where a man's honor is bound up with his mother's and his wife's reputations, Bridget's comment was mockery and disrespectful, or even said to be, quote, inviting fairy talk into his household, end quote.
Okay.
Now, today, most people chalk it up to Bridget being so independent, and she was just being witty or funny more than anything. But it really stuck in Michael's craw. And not only that, Michael was so superstitious and apparently saw the mark of evil or the devil or fairies everywhere. Now, who's the one who's sick and who's the one who's not, Michael?
Wow.
In early March 1895, after walking outside during bad weather near a hill known locally as a fairy fort, Bridget fell ill with chills, headaches, and a fever, probably from a respiratory infection like pneumonia or possibly tuberculosis. In fact, many people think it was tuberculosis because she went from being a rosy-cheeked, attractive woman to looking bad. That's what the sources said. She looked bad. She looked sickly and bad.
Right.
Around March 4th, 1895, Bridget gets sicker, and her husband Michael calls for the doctor. First summoned was the regular doctor, Dr. Matthew Crean, but he didn't show up right away. And around Sunday, March 9th, 1895, Bridget had been sick in bed for several days when her father, Patrick Boland, walked to Feathered, a town in Tipperary County, to fetch Dr. Crean. But Dr. Crean still did not arrive right away. And by Monday, March 11th, Michael himself went into town to demand that Dr. Crean come, even complaining about him to the Poor Law Guardian. And the Poor Law Guardian, he supervised relief for the destitute, including managing the workhouse and increasingly providing outdoor relief, public health services, and sanitation. So he's tattling on Dr. Crean. And soon after, Dr. Crean arrived. And when he finally did, and he examined Bridget, he diagnosed her with, quote, nervous excitement and slight bronchitis or a lung infection. He prescribed some medicine for, quote, slight inflammation from the tubes of the lungs, end quote.
Okay.
And he left. But he did say that Bridget seemed very nervous.
Well, yeah, nervousness is a diagnosis that a lot of doctors will prescribe.
True. It's true. But if I had Michael as a husband, I'd be nervous too.
Yeah.
Soon after, Michael, who had zero faith in Dr. Crean or his diagnosis or the medicine he prescribed, Michael sent for the priest, Father Cornelius Ryan. I think he went by Con. And Bridget's condition wasn't improving, and Michael wanted Father Ryan to come and give her the sacraments and to drive out the evil spirits from the house. And we do know that Father Ryan came at least once. And when he was there, he believed that she was very ill, and so he effectively prepared her for death. And he, too, thought that Bridget seemed very nervous and anxious. And when Father Ryan does this, the neighbors take this as a sign of how seriously and gravely ill Bridget is. So, small town, it's like Michael's wife, they did last rites. You know, the father was here. You know, it's bad. She's going to die.
Right.
Michael's friend, a neighbor, and a storyteller named Jack Dunne was in the house, and he insisted to Michael, a man who's already suspicious and believed in fairies, that Bridget's case was, quote, fairy mischief, end quote, and that the doctor has naught to do for her, Fortis, not your wife is in there, end quote. And Fortis is Latin. It's the word commonly used in Irish crest mottos because it means strong, brave, or courageous.
Okay.
But Jack Dunne is like, dude, you need a fairy doctor to take care of your wife. And we all know she's walking through the fairy fort. She's talking smack about your mama, and she's way too independent, and she talks back to you all the time. It's the fairies. So that's what he's telling him. So when Michael goes back to see Dr. Crean, he also stops to get herbs and instructions from a man named Dennis Gainey, a local fairy doctor. Now, Dennis is never going to come to Bridget and Michael's home to see with his own eyes Bridget or how ill she actually is. On the night of Wednesday, March 13th, a number of people came to the cottage. Later in the night, shouts were heard, quote, away she goes, end quote.
Okay.
The neighbors were helping Michael to drive out the evil spirits and the witches. And a number of men took hold of Bridget in the bed. John Dunne was holding her by the hand. Pat Kennedy was holding her right arm. James Kennedy, her left arm. And Billy Kennedy, these are all cousins, was lying across her legs, preventing her from moving. She shouted and screamed as they lifted her out of the bed and put her body over the fire.
Really?
The fire was low. They did not burn her. Michael was walking around the kitchen holding a saucepan containing herbs. Her father, Patrick, held her body for a while to make her answer questions. Questions like, are you the daughter of Patrick Boland in the name of God? And Bridget replied, I am, Dada. I am, Dad. It's me. I'm Bridget. I'm right here.
Jeez.
Michael asked her in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, was she his wife? And she replied that she was. They were now satisfied they had the real Bridget and not a witch. And then they took her back to bed and went to get some more herbal medicines that were prescribed by Gainey. And as they poured these into her, she screams and she protests. And when they had gotten some of it into her, they shook her backwards and forwards in the bed, and they all shouted, away with you, come home, Bridget Boland, in the name of God.
Wow.
They touched her with a red poker to encourage her to take the herbs, and the red mark was left on her forehead.
Jeez.
She also had a red bruise on her neck where they had squeezed her. And when they'd finished with her, Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Burke, who's a neighbor, said she should put on some dry night clothes. And the women went and found these, and they put new clothes on Bridget. And they asked her if she knew the people who are standing around her. Do you know who we all are? And she was like, yeah, I know who you are. And Michael showed her one of the Kennedys and asked her, what relation is she to you? What relation is he to you? And she was like, these are my first cousins. And everyone in the room was brought before her, and she was asked if she knew them. Well, she knew them all, okay? Yeah. By March 14th, Michael again goes out specifically to see Dennis Gainey and get these herbs. And this time, Michael brings home a more formal herbal cure and some ritual instructions to rid Bridget of the fairy that is inhabiting her body. So she's giving them all the right answers. She just doesn't want to take this stuff that they're forcing down her throat.
Yeah.
And then she doesn't want them holding her body over the fire. Okay?
I can't imagine why. I mean, come on.
Now, once this happens, he's got this ritual in hand. All common sense and what was at the time modern medicine goes out the window. Michael was going to use Dennis Gainey's advice and herbs with the help of his neighbor, Jack Dunne, who thought he was a fairy expert. Now, the fairy herbs and the fairy doctor's regimen was boiling these herbs, dousing Bridget, holding her over a fire, and making pishogs or charms to place around the house. And pishogs are folk magic, like an Irish curse that's usually found in rural communities. Okay. So Michael now has these herbs to give to his wife to drive out the fairy. Nothing for the upper respiratory infection or pneumonia or tuberculosis, just something to drive out the fairies. And Michael was convinced that Bridget was a changeling. She'd been replaced by a fairy. Why? Because her illness seemed to make her a different person. Oh my gosh. She was irritable, and she wasn't getting well fast enough for Michael. She's not getting over this illness fast enough. Wow. This and Dennis Gainey had filled his head with fairy tales. Literally. And I don't like even using that word.
Yeah.
By March 15th, Michael had taken matters into his own hands. He believed it was the 8th day of his wife's possession. John Dunne told him that he would have enough to do to bring her back. It's so much to bring her back. And he told him, boil the herbs in a pot, make the sign of the cross over the pot, and call on pishogs to help him. And to add to Michael's emotional turmoil, his father dies right in the middle of all of this.
Wow.
Now, while he's giving all these treatments to Bridget, sometimes he believed that she was actually his wife. More times than that, she was a witch. But the night of Thursday, March 15th, was the faithful night. On the final night, two men, Smith and Hogan, came into the cottage at Bridget's request. She believed that they could help settle the differences that had risen between herself and Michael. And Michael told her to get out of bed, and he got 2 petticoats, a navy blue jacket, and a white shawl for her to dress herself. And he brought up a firm for her to sit on. I don't know what a firm is, but that's what she came in and sat on.
Okay.
She's asked how she is by one of the men, and she says, quote, "He's trying to make a fairy out of me. I sent for milk. He wouldn't let me drink it. Other people came into the cottage, and one of them said, 'Bridget, I'm very glad to see you up,'" end quote. So they're all chatting and drinking tea till past 1 o'clock. Mary Kennedy, a cousin of Bridget's, laid down on the bed, takes a nap for a little bit. She's awakened by her daughter screaming. She's got a little girl there with her.
Right.
And she wakes up because her little girl daughter is screaming, "Mammy, Mammy, Bridget's burning."
Oh.
So you see, Bridget's neighbors and family had gathered, including Joanna Burke, a cousin, Patrick Boland, Bridget's father, and her aunt, Mary Kennedy, cousins Patrick, James, and William Kennedy, and a neighbor, William Ahern, and of course, Michael and Jack Dunne, the man who had convinced a very impressionable husband that his wife had been taken by the fairies, and the woman they were looking at was not Bridget.
Wow.
So when Johanna Burke arrived, Bridget was in bed, but she was raving. Maybe she had a high fever.
Yeah.
Maybe she was hallucinating.
Sure.
More than likely, it was because over the past few days, Michael was forcing fairy cure rituals on her. And these friends and relatives were helping Michael to do this. They would administer a series of folk tests and cures. Bridget was restrained, forced to drink bitter herbal mixtures, including foxglove, while prayers and demands were shouted at her. And by the way, foxglove is Digitalis purpurea. That's it, right there.
I couldn't have said it any better.
Digitalis purpurea. It's a plant and the source of the modern drug digoxin. And all parts of this plant are poisonous. But foxglove will strengthen heart contractions and slow the heart rate. And modern medicine uses purified digitalis drugs for heart failure and things like atrial fibrillation, like AFib.
Right.
And it's closely monitored because there's apparently a very thin line between therapeutic levels and toxic levels when using this drug. But they're just flat out using the herb.
Yeah.
And it can cause irregular or very slow heartbeat, palpitations, dangerous dysrhythmias, low blood pressure, collapse, and ultimately cardiac arrest. It can cause nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, loss of appetite, confusion, disorientation or hallucinations, depression, fatigue, weakness, seizures, and classic halo or color vision disturbances. I'm not finished. Headache, lethargy, rash, tremors, and overall malaise.
Sounds like one of those drugs you hear on TV.
But I'm just saying, Bridget's probably showing some of these symptoms, right?
Of course.
So they force this fairy potion. Several men hold her down on the bed, one at her arms, one at her head, while Michael forced this potion between her teeth. They're doing this for like 3 days straight.
Ugh.
And he's forcing this on her, saying things like, and this is a quote, "Take it, you bitch, you old faggot, or I'll kill you," end quote.
Wow.
And they watched to see whether she could swallow it or she would vomit it back up. And then they did the identity tests in the name of God all over again. And throughout the rituals, she was repeatedly asked 3 times in a row, "Are you Bridget Boland, wife of Michael Cleary, in the name of God?" and ordered to answer clearly. And she does. She does.
Wow.
But if she faltered or answered slowly or didn't give the answer the way Michael wanted, he took it as proof that the being in front of him was not his wife, but a fairy.
Jeez. Wow.
They used urine and iron to drive out the fairy.
Ugh.
They doused Bridget with urine, sometimes mixed with hen's dung, because both urine and filth were believed to repel or torture fairies and evil spirits. And Michael also used, again, this red-hot poker, pressing it or threatening it with her to her face and body to make her open her mouth so he could pour more of the potion down her throat.
Man.
And the theory is that fairies fear iron and fire.
Yeah.
And then there was the ordeal by fire. In classic Changeling lore, a false fairy child or double will scream, flee, or be driven out if held near an open flame. So Michael ordered that Bridget be hauled from the bed and held over the fire in their hearth. Now, relatives described lifting her body and holding her over the flames for several minutes while they repeated the identity questions and watched for some supernatural reaction that would betray this changeling. And Michael and the other men repeatedly demanded that she proved she was Bridget, daughter of Patrick Boland and wife of Michael Cleary. Can you imagine? They're doing this to her day after day after day, making her answer 3 times, which has something to do with the Holy Trinity.
Right.
And they would just hold her over the fire over and over again.
Man.
Yeah, and when she would answer correctly, yes, Dad, it's me, and Michael, yes, you are my husband, just for a very brief moment, they would think, okay, we've driven the fairy out. But when she would later relapse after being doused in urine and all this stuff shoved down her throat, if she hesitated or resisted, they would repeat the test over and over again and hold her over fire again.
Man.
But then on the final night, she got out of bed and sat by the fire with her father and Michael and a couple of other people. And as they sat there, everyone was talking about fairies. And Bridget said to Michael, quote, "Your mother used to go with the fairies, and that is why you think I am going with them too," end quote. To which Michael said to her, "Did my mother tell you that?" And she said, yeah, she did, that she gave 2 nights to the fairies.
Okay.
Now, if I was Bridget, I'd be keeping the name of fairy out of my mouth, but she did say that. And maybe she was doing it out of spite, like, you're doing all this to me and your mother went with the fairies. Right. Maybe it was, don't do this to me because even your mother did this. Right. Neighbor Johanna Burke made some tea. She offered Bridget a cup, and Michael got 3 bits of bread and jam and said she should eat them before, quote, she should take a sup, end quote.
What's that?
Well, I think it means before you take dinner, supper.
Oh.
But I looked it up and it says that it means taking the soup. And you might think that means eating soup, but it's actually a highly derogatory statement because the phrase originated during the Great Famine when some Irish Catholics, starving and desperate, accepted food or soup from Protestant missionary societies or relief organizations. And the accusations that someone took the soup is even over 170 years later considered a slur against a person's ancestors, implying a lack of integrity. You took the soup.
Okay.
But this is the last night, and Michael would give her multiple treatments across the hours of time. She was forced to swallow the herbs again, mixed this time with urine. She was then held over the fire to drive out the fairy. She was poked with the hot iron on the forehead. He burned her face. All the while, Bridget is crying out to him while she's in intense pain, "I am Bridget Boland, your wife."
Jeez. And
when this didn't convince Michael that his wife was back, he would force feed her this bread and jam, demanding that she say her name 3 times. And when she resisted, he was enraged. He asked her 3 times, "Are you Bridget Cleary, my wife, in the name of God?" And she answered twice and ate 2 pieces of the bread and jam. And when she didn't answer the 3rd time, he forced her to eat the 3rd piece of bread, saying, quote, "Eat it or you'll go down," end quote.
Wow.
He flung Bridget on the ground, put his knee on her chest, caught her by the throat, and forced the bit of bread and jam into her mouth, saying, quote, swallow it. Is it down? Is it down? End quote. And at this point, Johanna, the lady who's standing there, calls out to Michael and says, don't you see? 'Tis Bridgie is in it, meaning that it was Bridget,
right,
his wife, who was there and not a fairy.
Right.
And Bridget had earlier whispered to their cousin Johanna, quote, Michael Cleary is making a fairy of me, end quote. Then Michael stripped Bridget down to her shift, held a blazing stick from the fire near her mouth, and demanded that she answer her name again. And she's lying on the floor, and he puts the red stump across her mouth this time. So she's got marks on her face. Now he's putting the red hot poker across her mouth. And Johanna yells at Michael that she and her brothers would, quote, smash the door and go for the peelers, end quote.
What's that?
The police. But Michael repeated that the door would not be opened and no one would leave the house until his wife came back. Now, at this point, she's in her shift, her underdress, and he's holding her down in front of this fireplace, got a knee in her chest. He's threatening her with this burning stick. And when he put the hot poker near her mouth, he called on her to answer her name 3 times. He said he would burn her if she didn't answer. She answered him, but the answer didn't satisfy him. Now, there are a couple of differing accounts of what happens next. Some say that her shift caught fire first from the hearth, but one thing is certain, Michael got a tin of lamp oil and poured it over her. She went up in flames, and he fanned the fire, burning her body and declaring, quote, she's not my wife. She's an old deceiver sent in place of my wife. It is not Bridget. I am burning. You will soon see her go up the chimney, end quote.
Chewy.
Now, when the flames had died, he caught her by the head and threw her on the floor, quote, like an old turnip, end quote. Then he got an old bag and a sheet and wrapped her up. Her foot was sticking out, and he gave it a kick with his boot. He put the bundle in the middle of the floor, opened the door, and took the body outside, locking the people who were with him inside the house behind him. Wow. No one leaves.
I'd be scared at that point.
I think a lot of them were afraid of him, like everything that had happened over those 3 days. He and his father-in-law, Patrick Boland, buried her in a shallow grave in a nearby boggy dike about a quarter mile from the house, covering her with clay and brush. And they were gone for about an hour. And when he returned, he took out his black-handled knife and shouted, Patsy Kennedy, quote, I'll call your name 3 times, and if you don't come out, I'll drive the knife to the handle into you. Patsy answered.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. Michael said to them, all have to come out. I've the hole nearly made, he said. Quote, I couldn't drive the devil out the chimney, so I drove him out the door, end quote.
Man.
Then he threatened his other cousins who'd yelled at him the entire time he's torturing his wife, saying, Hannah, which is Johanna, it is hard to depend on you. Quote, if you were to be kept in jail till you rot, don't tell, end quote.
Whoa.
So he told the witnesses of that night to say that Bridget had spat at Johanna Burke, then ran out the front door in her nightdress and went off into the darkness. Now, over the next few nights, Michael kept vigil at a nearby fairy fort, and I'm going to try to say this correct, at Kilnagrany Hill, claiming he expected the real Bridget to appear riding a white horse so he could cut her free from the fairies and bring her home, a belief entirely consistent with changeling rescue motifs in Irish lore. He even kept a knife with him to cut her free.
He could have worked for Disney.
He said that the being that was burned in the hearth had been, quote, an old deceiver or fairy substitute, and that his real wife would be cut out of the fairy ropes, end quote, and brought home.
Man.
Now, the locals grew suspicious, and these are people who are already like avoiding the fairy forts, right?
Right.
But they're suspicious. Where was Bridget? Meanwhile, the police, under the direction of District Inspector J.A. Waynesboro of Carrick-on-Shore, proceeded to investigate where his wife had gone. Well, Michael at first told Sergeant Egan that Bridget had left the house that night, sometimes saying that she went out at midnight with, quote, 2 men, end quote, and walked into the fields, implying just like an ordinary disappearance. She just walked away.
Right.
Her dad, Patrick, who lived in or near the cottage, was present for most of the doctoring and the night of the killing, and he helped to carry her body out, said that Bridget had been, quote, strong when she, quote, went away, when she walked away. There was nothing wrong with her when she walked away. But at the same time, Michael insists to others that the real Bridget was not dead but had been taken, and that she would soon return from the fairy world riding this white horse. And I think her father believed that as well. And no one wants to think they've just participated in the murder of their own child, right? He said, quote, my daughter will come back to me, end quote. Yeah.
Man.
He thinks that she's just gone away and she's going to return. And he said that she was not dying when she left the house. Quote, 3 more persons can say that she was strong the night she went away. She got up and got dressed, end quote. Which, I mean, he's just saying she was fine. Yeah. She was fine. When everybody saw her, she was fine. And that is true. They did get her up and get her dressed. Right. Acting Sergeant Egan of the police in Drangen saw Michael leaving the village on March 16th, and he followed him and overtook him at the house of Mrs. Kennedy. And he asked him about his wife. And the police grow more suspicious about her disappearance and the talk of fairies around town, and they searched the fields after he says, oh, she went away with these men, you know, but they're seeing him like keeping vigil at this fairy fort. So on March 22nd, 1895, they start looking, and Constable James Dwyer and Sergeant Rogers noticed some disturbed earth and a crude covering of stones and brush. And when they dug down, they found Bridget's charred body in a shallow grave.
Wow.
And other than a pair of black stockings, she was nude, and her head was in a sack. And then she's just wrapped up in an old sheet. Man. And when her body was examined, doctors reported that she was largely burned from the waist up on the right side of her torso, and her body was so extensively burned that, quote, her internal organs were protruding. Her face and hair were badly charred. Her hands were charred and contracted, consistent with a person who had been alive or only recently dead when the burning occurred. And the postmortem concluded that, quote, no living subject could exist, end quote, long with such abdominal burns. So death followed soon after the fire. And in a coroner's inquest on March 23rd, 1895, the 12-man jury returned a verdict of death by burning. But it added the writer, quote, how or by whom caused we have no evidence to show, end quote. And the whom was a criminal matter, but the how was part of the remit of the coroner's inquiry and in evidence. So it's like, who did it and why did they do it? How did they do this? And according to the witnesses, these acts did not occur in a single burst of violence. They were spread over several days and nights, with Michael pacing, making the sign of the cross, invoking prayers and fairy talk, while relatives watched and sometimes participated. And Bridget reportedly told her cousin that Michael was trying to make a fairy of her, showing that she understood that her illness and distress were being interpreted through this changeling belief, and that the people around her were more invested in driving out a fairy than in treating her as a sick woman. Right. But why didn't anybody stop Michael?
They're probably afraid of him.
Well, after Bridget's body was found and the verdict of death by burning was handed down, 9 people were arrested, including Michael and several of Bridget's relatives. The same 9 people were charged with participating in her murder.
Wow.
Local journalists reacted to the news of the case rather quickly, even poking around the house after her husband Michael's arrest. And from July to December of 1895, over 60 reports appeared in British, American, and Irish newspapers. And a Mexican newspaper even ran a story. I mean,
Wow.
it was world news.
Yeah, I mean, that's just horrific.
Legal hearings began in early April. The formal court session opened in Clonmel on July 4th, 1895, where the testimony described in detail the fairy cure rituals, the threats, and Michael's insistence that a changeling had replaced his wife. And in court, the prosecution laid out the sequence of abuse, the fairy cure rituals, and the burning and the calling on relatives and neighbors to describe Michael's threats and his insistence that Bridget was a fairy impostor. And most of what we know about the killing inside the Cleary cottage comes from relatives who turned on Michael and described it all in court, what they had seen and what they had heard. Johanna Burke, the first cousin who lived nearby, was in and out of the house for days and became the prosecution's main witness, supplying the core narrative that the judge treated as the most reliable. And then Mary Kennedy, Bridget's aunt, and her sons, Patrick, James, and William, they were present during the herbal cures and that fatal night. Their evidence showed both participation and fear of Michael.
Yeah.
And when Johanna testified on the Wednesday before her death, Bridget whispered that she had a pain in her head and that Michael Cleary was making a fairy of her. She added that he had tried to burn her 3 months earlier. So it didn't just start when she got gravely ill with TB or an upper respiratory infection. He had tried to burn her 3 months beforehand. She described men holding Bridget on the bed, forcing her to swallow the herbs from Gainey, the fairy doctor, and dragging her to the hearth while demanding 3 times that she say that she was Bridget Boland, the wife of Michael Cleary. There was testimony that Bridget was, quote, broken and defeated, end quote, but alive when they put her back to bed that night. So remember, they took her and she had some tea.
Sure.
And on the Friday night of the killing, Johanna told police and later the court that she initially repeated Michael's cover story, that Bridget had run out and then broke down, and told the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, once the body was found. So in testimony, they talk about taking her over the fire back and forth and taking her back over the fire again. And Bridget's dad, Patrick, went along with Michael's claim that Bridget had left the house, telling the police he believed his daughter would, quote, come back, and clinging to that phrase, even in court. They have found her body, and her father is saying she's gonna come back. Yeah.
Wow.
Patrick Kennedy told the magistrates he helped Michael move the body, quote, for fear he would be killed, end quote. So it really just showed how intimidated they all were
Sure.
by Michael's rage.
Yeah, well, I said that earlier on. They were just afraid of this guy.
Yeah.
He's nuts.
He was shouting threats during the torture and the burning, saying she's not my wife, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And of course, quote, you'll soon see her go up the chimney.
Yeah.
Which the court actually took as proof that fairy belief framed his violence. So they're looking at him, and it's not like he's insane. They're saying his frame of mind was that she had been taken away. She was a changeling, right?
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Michael said of killing his wife, quote, she's burned now, and God knows I did not mean to do it, end quote. And he later blamed neighbor Jack Dunne, quote, I would never have forced my wife into the fire but for Jack. It was he who told me my wife was a fairy, end quote.
Okay.
On July 5th, 1895, the defense leaned on the idea that Michael and the others acted under a delusion or sincere belief in fairy lore, and the counsel for the defense, along with agreement of the prosecution, entered a plea of guilty, not to murder, but to manslaughter. And the presiding judge told the jury that given this context, a murder verdict would not be appropriate if they accepted the belief as genuine. So he's saying, if you really believe him,
Right.
it's manslaughter.
Right.
Michael Cleary is found guilty. Judge O'Brien reportedly remarked that the case showed, quote, a degree of darkness in the mind, not just of one person, but of several, a moral darkness, even religious darkness, end quote. And he framed it as a collective failure rather than an isolated aberration. And in the end, Michael Cleary, of course, found guilty of manslaughter. Michael's crying while the judge is telling him that he has to hand down a punishment that is adequate to his offense. He is sentenced to 20 years of hard labor in prison. And as he is taken away down to the jail cells, he's crying, quote, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, end quote.
Okay.
As for his and her family members and neighbors, Patrick Kennedy, who helped with the burial, was considered the most culpable after Michael. He was convicted of wounding, getting 5 years hard labor. Jack Dunne, the neighbor and fairy expert and advisor, was convicted of wounding, receiving 3 years hard labor. James Kennedy is convicted of wounding. 18 months hard labor was his sentence. William Kennedy got the exact same sentence, 18 months. Michael Kennedy, convicted of wounded, 6 months hard labor. Patrick Boland, Bridget's father, is convicted of wounding, 6 months hard labor, although some sources say that he was released right away.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no consolation regardless.
Yeah. He said, quote, now that my child is burned, there is no use in saying anything about it, but God help me in the latter end of my days, end quote. The case was sensationalized in the press as Ireland's last witch burning, even though witchcraft was never the formal charge, and has since become a key example of how changeling belief intersected with the patriarchy, mental strain, and community complicity in late 19th century rural Ireland. Everybody served their sentence. Bridget's husband, Michael, was released from Maryborough Prison on April 28, 1910. He went to Liverpool and immigrated to Canada in mid-1910, where he disappears into relative obscurity.
The fairies took him away.
The fairies took him to Canada.
Yeah.
Bridget's body was buried in an unmarked grave outside the cemetery wall in the village of Clonmel. I'm trying.
You got through the whole thing pretty well.
The village of Clonmel, and many say she is buried near her mother's grave. There are modern photos and accounts that describe 4 low rectangular stones between the cemetery wall and a crucifix in the graveyard as marking her uninscribed resting place. There is still a children's rhyme in Ireland that goes, are you a witch, or are you a fairy, or are you the wife of Michael Cleary?
Oh, wow.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, my take on this whole thing, it's just sad when people buy into folklore and things like that. But I also think that Michael, I think he was obviously a little nuts, but when you combine the beliefs and somebody that's just kind of unstable, that's what you get.
Well, and she was the perfect target because she wasn't subservient to her husband, and he didn't like that. And she was very independent, and she would just walk through the fairy forts like, come and get me, fairies. Right. I don't believe in all this BS. Right. And, she's out there saying, he's trying to say that I'm a changeling, and I'm not. Yeah. I'm not. So she went to her death telling them, I'm not a changeling. The fairies haven't taken me. It's me, over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's just sad.
While they shoved all these herbs down her throat and put urine on her body and then held her over the fire and then just eventually burned her to death.
Disgusting.
I know.
Well.
So if you're in Ireland, watch out for the fairy forts. That's all I can say.
Well, let's move from the fairies to some idiots with a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one I'm calling Incarceration? Well, there's an app for that.
Okay.
A 12-year-old boy adamantly denied having stolen an iPhone when questioned by police at his home.
Oh.
And then the iPhone rang in his closet. Okay, yes, he stole that. But as for the BlackBerry he was also accused of stealing, he double adamantly denied.
He doubled down.
Yeah. And then guess what?
It rang.
It rang in his closet.
No.
Oh, well, he was arrested.
This kid's like, dang it.
All right, number 2, I'm calling Just Kidding.
Okay.
Don't you hate it when you suffer a heart attack and you think you're going to die, so you confess to a 17-year-old murder, only to find out that you're not going to die and then get sentenced to life in prison as a result?
Oh, my gosh, I need the name. We're doing a story on it.
Yeah, so does James Washington of Nashville, because it happened to him.
Oh, wow. Yep. That's a good one.
Okay, third and finally.
TMI. Too much information.
Yeah, there were 2 guys from a local high school that robbed a little convenience store. They had ski masks, and the robbery went pretty smoothly for them. But unfortunately, they wore their Letterman's coats with their names on the back, and they were later arrested.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah. Now,
they'll never know it's us.
All right, now I do have a bonus here.
Okay. Oh, we get a bonus. Yeah. Bless your heart.
Because Marty wanted, the older things.
Yes, yes.
Tommy, her husband, and my best friend from high school, he sent me this. And this was an article from the 1903 Sydney Daily News, my hometown, in Tommy's hometown. It was August 10th, 1903. I wanted to put that in there. That was early. Okay.
Not too long after they burned Bridget alive in Ireland. Okay.
All right. Immediately after the ball game yesterday afternoon at the Halfway Park in Washington Township, the members of the Sydney and Piqua ball teams were placed under arrest by Deputy Sheriff E.P. Ailes, charged with playing ball on Sunday. They were allowed to go on their own recognizance, and say that 10 times fast, and ordered to appear before Mayor Moore this morning to answer to the charge against him.
I wonder what Mayor Moore said.
The members of the 2 teams appeared before the mayor about 9 o'clock this morning, pleaded guilty, and were each fined $1 and a proportionate share of the cost. And that came from the Sydney Daily News in 1903, August 10th.
Don't be playing ball on Sunday, on the Lord's Day.
Exactly. But thank you, Tommy, for bringing that to me. It made me laugh.
Or they're going to stuff herbs down your throat.
Yep.
And say you're a bad person.
And toss your baseball in the Miami River.
There you have it. I mean, what if they got rained out on Saturday? They were just doing a makeup game.
Yes.
And it cost them all $1.
On a Sunday. Heathens.
Yeah. Well, if you have a bless your heart, or you know somebody who's playing ball on Sunday, you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
All you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Please do.
That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
And he doesn't think I'm a fairy. Or a changeling.
The next time I get a cold, I'm not saying a word.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.